Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A Grand Chute town supervisor facing a felony charge is now on trial.
We reported this stems from a Department of Justice investigation launched nearly 3 years ago. Court documents show Ron Wolf is accused of having a private interest in a public contract as owner of a landscaping business. In our first Alert update, Jason Zimmerman breaks down what was said in the first day of testimony. He's live now in Appleton with more on that. Jason.
Bail testimony for today wrapped up just a short time ago, and it will resume tomorrow. What we heard so far is both sides laying the groundwork for their case. Much of the trial is expected to focus on whether Grand Chute Town Supervisor Ron Wolf knew it was a conflict of interest to bid on projects for his business that would likely go before the town board even if he did abstain from voting.
Mr. Wolf violated state statute. He violated it around the same time period in which he was being trained not to do this. It's his choices, and only his choices, which put him in that chair.
In this particular incident, Wolf's business, Lakeshore Cleaners, was paid more than $26,000 for the seeding of Champion Pond. This was a project he bid on roughly 1 month after taking office. The defense Wednesday telling the jury there was no attempt ever made by Wolf to conceal his ownership, despite claims made by investigators.
Not a single person raised a question or voiced a concern about Mr. Wolf's company performing this work. The motion was made to approve the contract, and it was unanimously passed.
Among those testifying were former and current town employees, including former clerk Angie Kane. Also, a webinar was presented as evidence that Wolf was required to watch.
The general rule is that you may not negotiate, bid for, or enter into any contracts where you have that direct or indirect private financial interest, so it's your business, your private contract.
The defense today also suggested that Wolf is expected to testify. If convicted, he faces up to 3.5 years behind bars and a fine up to $10,000. Reporting in Appleton, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.